This is BBC 5 Live, available on the BBC Sounds app.
The Stephen Nolan Show with Rick Edwards.
Good evening. Tonight on the programme, I want to hear your views on body image. All this week, BBC Radio has come together for Rethink, a range of programmes exploring how society could change after the coronavirus pandemic. A load of people have told us what they want to happen. They're not predicting the future, but imagining how things could be better. Dave, so you are a comedian and best-selling author. You wrote Weight Expectations. Tell me a bit about the book, first of all, and then your experience of lockdown.
So my experience of lockdown's been a bit weird. So the book is all about how I had anorexia as a teenager, and I was asked to sort of write a book about that, which was lovely, because I sort of developed it in late teens, and then sort of early 20s I got down. I was severely clinically anorexic, and I was at a place, shall we say, where they said, like, look, we have to fast-track treatment and start working on you now because you are in severe danger. Now, the irony of that is they actually weigh you when you finish your treatment, and I was very lucky that I had 2.5 years of wonderful treatment at the Maudsley Hospital in South London. And when I finished, I remember my therapist sort of put me on the scales and looked at me, and she said, oh, right, I don't really know how to tell you this, but you're now technically overweight, which is a very weird kind of thing to be for. Like, is that recovery, or is that not? Is that going too far? So I've been all different shapes and sizes, and now I've got to a point I don't really like my body, but you know what? I don't think anyone does. And to be honest, I've also got too cynical as well. If people sort of say, I love every single part of my body, I'm like, are you human? Because I just think at the end of the day, your body is just the thing that you go around in. And yes, I'm not in a Ferrari. I'm essentially in a Fiat Punto, but at least it gets me from A to B.
Nothing wrong with a Punto, Dave. Very reliable vehicle. Yeah. Do you think that men struggle with body image as much as women, but maybe talk about it less?
I think it's definitely not anything new. For example, Byron. Not a lot of people realise that Byron actually was very actively anorexic, and Byron really struggled with his own body image. He actually had a deformed leg, but he hated it, and he hated his body image. So I don't think it's anything new. And I think blokes have different stresses and strains than women. It probably manifests in a very different way. But you're absolutely right that kind of emotional intelligence doesn't really trickle down to blokes. You know, like as a kid, if you fall over and hurt yourself, it's generally, I'll go and see mummy. Whereas if you need discipline, and it's, or you wait till your father gets home. So those sort of genderized roles, I don't think really help. But I also think, final little point, I realize I'm rambling, but the final little point is I think we're getting so much better at this. And I think, you know what, shows like this, we wouldn't have done this 5 years ago. And people aren't motivated by the negative, they're motivated by the positive. And I think we need to give a little bit of airspace to how much better are we getting at diversity and body image and representation, and that is incredible, and we need to keep going. And it's not perfect, but I think that's really enthusing.
As a consequence of having written the book and shared your experiences of anorexia, Dave, do more men talk to you about this stuff?
Loads. You would not believe the amount of blokes that come up to me after gigs, that message me. I hate to say it, but they're not, yoga pant wearing, hemp carrying hippie dippies. They are genuinely, like, I've had builders come up to me. I've had people in stag do's come up to me. I've had just average office workers that have said, look, I am really struggling. And one thing that is really common in blokes is overeating. Binge eating disorder makes up for about 50% of all eating disorders, and it's pretty much a 50-50 split of people that have eating disorders is men. So it is a huge thing. And yeah, so many blokes talk to me and sort of say, you know what, I don't really know how to even go about talking about it.
What's your advice for these people sort of coming up to you after gigs? Because I suppose you have experience of it, but you're not a qualified psychologist or anything. What do you say?
I think my first thing is I'm just a professional idiot, so don't take too much. You know what I mean? Like
I know exactly what you mean, Dave. Yeah,
I'm not on a 5-step course or anything, but I would say no. It's okay to feel uncomfortable, and it's okay to not have the words. I think this is something that's really missing in the mental health dialogue in general. People expect everyone to be able to just talk, but you know what, I didn't have the words, the language, the communication, the structure in order to explain what's going on in my old brain bonds. So I would say take time, think on it, and take someone that you feel that you can chat to, and say to them, be honest and say, like, this is probably going to be an awkward conversation. I'm not entirely sure what I want to say, how I want to say it. But you know what? I'm really struggling with my body at the moment. And I've got to a point where I do want to change. And there's tiny little things. If anyone's listening to this and they realise that there's a mate out there that they want to reach out to, tiny little things, like, for example, instead of sitting opposite each other, staring eye on eye, we have studied and we know that actually walking next to each other, or while you're playing the PlayStation, or while you're down the pub when they're open, if you sit next to each other, that's a lot less threatening and intimidating, and is so much more fertile for good conversation.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's a great tip.
Loads of psychologists go, let's go for a walk, and they're having a wander, and that's when the real thoughts come out, because you went thinking, this is really intense. You're just a lot more easy.
How has your actual lockdown experience been in terms of body image? Has there been any changes, any news?
I think, like everyone, look, I have struggled because, there's a lot of stress, especially sort of my whole industry of stand-up, that's gone down the toilet, and money and the uncertainty. And I think with stress, sometimes you instantly go to control the controllables. And yeah, I did feel a compunction to go back to more of those disordered habits of calorie counting, exercising, and weighing myself. But I also think that something that's really important with all of the wonderful, lovely therapy that I've had is, I think one of the really biggest keys to this is try and think about how you are treating yourself. Would you treat anybody else like that? Would you say to someone else, you've got duck lips? Or would you say, look at that tie around your waist, sort it out? And the answer's probably no. So why are you doing that to yourself? And actually the brain is a very flexible thing, and once you can acknowledge something, that's the first step to changing it.
Thanks to Dave. Don't forget, you can hear more about the whole week of Rethink in a special programme on 5 Live and Radio 4 tomorrow night with Chris Mason and a host of guests and your calls. That's from 10 on Sunday night.
This is BBC 5 Live, available on the BBC Sounds app.
The Stephen Nolan Show with Rick Edwards.